Build compelling real-time apps quickly and scale them globally with the PubNub real-time network. Only PubNub delivers the core building blocks needed for any real-time application. Find out for yourself by signing up for free today. Visit pubnub.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Untether.tv. I'm your host and founder, Rob Woodbridge. This is that show that you come to each and every week to find out what's going on in the mobile industry, to find out the industries that are embracing mobile and the companies that are actually helping them forward in that case. Today, I've heard many companies talk about trying to get into healthcare, get into the hospitals, and they run in there head first and they bump into the hardest, heaviest, thickest concrete wall, which is process and procedure, and maybe a perception of being a Luddite society behind those closed doors in the hospitals. Their job is to save lives, not to embrace your technology. But I'm talking with a company today that is actually in the hospitals, that has been able to bring mobile into the hospitals at a great rate and a very successful rate, and the hospitals love it because it's saving them money. The company is Ingenious Med, and I have today Krina Patel, who's the Vice President of Professional Services at Ingenious Med. They're based out of Atlanta. And welcome, Krina. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Welcome. So this is great. I'm always fascinated by companies that are able to actually get into hospitals, get their services, get their products into hospitals, because traditionally, from what I've heard, it is literally the longest sales cycle you could possibly imagine. So you guys are in there. First, tell me about Ingenious Med.
So Ingenious Med was founded in 1999. We were founded by physicians, and we were for physicians. So as you can tell, the solution that we provided was actually created by the direct end user. So first of all, when physicians or any user actually looks at the system, ergonomically, they're just glued to it simply because the layout is in line with what they do every day. The technology is there, the patterns, the terms, the flows, the technical components are all fluid with what they're doing with their processes within the inpatient, outpatient settings.
So so what do you guys do for them? There's plenty that you do for them, but for 14 years you've been involved in this. Give us an example of how you infiltrate or how you get into and onto the doctors, get the doctors using you guys.
So what we specialize in is charge capture, which is the professional fee service side of the billing components. Obviously, there's a facility billing component that the hospital worries about, but we're all professional fee, getting the physicians paid. So traditionally, what they're doing is they're capturing these charges, and I'm going to refer to them as charges, on these pieces of paper, note cards, 3x5 cards that potentially end up in their jacket pockets, potentially at their dry cleaners, and 2 weeks of patients being seen and charges captured, just gone. No revenue reconciliation method, no revenue protection methodology, no organization, no accountability to the organization. You can't even, the organization doesn't even know what patients you're seeing at that point in time. So really what we do is we replace that paper, we replace that note card and all the processes around it. So not only do you guys think about the charge capture side of it, but there's a lot of patients that are being handed off from one physician to the other physician when you have shift change. So you got to think about communication methodologies. You also have to think about quality of care of the patient. Since we are at the point of care, since we are driving to be at the bedside, what can we do to whisper in the physician's ear to give them some evidence or give them some clinical decision support based on the criteria of the patient, the age, the disease categories that they may be assigned to, or the payers, knowing that there's certain methodologies that they would like us to take when taking care of those patients. And I think lastly, it's really providing the reporting metrics. You'll be surprised. I talked to some of the biggest health systems in the country, and I asked them, how do you know how you're going to staff a facility, a hospital facility? Well, we just kind of depend and see which one's fighting the most, which one's coming to us the most, being really egregious about we have to order or we have to hire. Where I get blown away because I tell them, you know what, I can actually give you real-time census data. I can trend for you any period of time and show you your spikes throughout the year when you probably need to pick up an additional FTE, and when you're actually dipping because we're out of flu season and you can probably drop a quarter or a half FTE. It's
pretty amazing. What, So it strikes me that what you guys do is that almost immediately. I mean, how much on the first thing, which is just simply billing. I mean, is there an estimate about how much these hospitals are losing as a result of that? It seems it would be a lot.
They don't know what they're losing.
So that's even worse.
It is worse.
Oh
You go in
goodness.
and today everybody's trying to sell a system. They're trying to sell you the EMR, which costs millions of dollars, right? They're trying to sell you another little system that's going to help you with order entries. They're going to send you another little system that's going to help you with revenue cycle. But nobody really is going to give you a return on any of those things. Those are just process improvement, their efficiencies, it's communications, it's streamlining the whole hospital at its entirety. So I think in our space where we're actually different is we are telling you you're actually going to get a $30,000 to $40,000 pickup after deploying us. And we'll come back in and we'll do the ROI and we'll show it to you. Statistically, it's proven from all the clients, all the names that we have on our actual client list. It's anywhere from the low 30s all the way to I've even seen 60s come in for some of these providers.
But that seems like that's astounding to me. You know, I understand there's a frenetic pace that goes on, and the medicine has to land where it is, and the tests have to be where they are. And I mean, I grew up on St. Elsewhere and ER, all of those kind of like I've seen this in action, right? Where it's like, damn the costs, save the patient, right? And then, but you don't see them in the television shows, like filling out the forms to fill out the bills to make sure that they've identified the customer and the cost and actually putting those together.
Exactly.
So, I mean, was that the premise? Was that the premise of Ingenious when it began? Was to just find those costs? Like '99, you guys were at the beginning of this internet revolution as well. Is that where you guys started, or did you guys migrate into that space?
So actually, that's a great question. We actually started from a coding compliance perspective. One of the things that happens in the industry, and I think it's a phenomenon, just like everybody gets audited for taxes, we actually get audited for making sure that your levels of service match the patient's documentation. For physicians straight out of residency, it's really not that clear. I don't think it's clear to majority of the physicians out there what constitutes a level 1, level 2, level 3 severity of patient. So what we did is on a Palm Pilot, is created the clinical decision support as to telling you what's going to constitute for what severity. So you need to document X amount of review of systems, HPI items, in order to say that this is a level 2 charge, and to be compliant, we're giving you everything that you need to put into the patient's chart. At the time, when we're talking in '99, EMRs were just getting traction and they were just coming out. So actually having that on your mobile device, sitting down at a desk, writing a patient's progress note, and having those elements to guide you was a need that there wasn't a single vendor that was filling that need. And I think our founders found, number one, it's important to capture the charge, which is the platform we built right with it, the charge capture platform. But if you're going to capture the charge, you've got to do it in a compliant manner. Because in this day and age, Medicare is looking for everybody who's taking money from them fraudulently.
Yes, and rightly so. And rightly so. And my guess is that over the last 14 or 15 years, even since mid-90s, I would say, since really electronic document management came into place, there is a greater and greater and greater certainty that somebody who is doing something fraudulent will get caught as a result of the technology being implemented. This just brings that a little bit closer. And the onus ends up being on the doctors, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they want to protect themselves.
Yes.
So from that standpoint, when the founders made that solution, and they made it mobile, that's really where it fit the best in that world. And today, I think we went through a wave. We went through a wave of, all right, we're actually going to let the mobile devices go because the Palm died.
Yeah.
Windows Mobile somewhat died.
Yes.
And then we went through this phase of BlackBerry's it, and we tried to revive Windows Mobile at some extent. And then iPhone came out with the first generation phone. And then you started to see a pickup in all mobile usage, and then Android came out. And now I don't think we have a physician that doesn't have a smartphone.
I remember those times. I'm old enough to remember the 1999 and the Palm revolution. I mean, I maybe got my first Palm in 1996, maybe 1995, whenever the first version came out of Palm. And, I think I saw my family physician carrying one of these in maybe 2000, right? Because it was, he could do some diagnostics, or he could diagnose anything, about his patients based on the Palm. He used to have to go through an encyclopedia back then.
Exactly.
But 99 is early to start looking at mobile, seeing as how it took 8 years, really. I mean, RIM came out, BlackBerry came out in 2004 and took over, email on the hip. But really, as you said, the commercialization of mobile didn't happen until the iPhone came out, 8 years after you guys came out with your Palm version.
Right.
These guys must have been visionaries to sit back and think in 1999, Palm device, we can help doctors. Like, that must have been the hardest sell ever at the time.
It actually was, because they didn't really get the physicians. It was convenient, but then nobody could actually get, well, how does the revenue trickle out effectively? Are they going to do it? Or what if they can't find a terminal to sync to? I think that
was a big one. That was a big one.
You got to sync with your computer only at home. So really, you're doing it at point of care, but it's really not batching until the following day from the revenue perspective. So, I mean, our founders did a phenomenal job of working through all of that and ultimately giving us the web solution in the interim until mobile came back again.
Yeah, and then it did. It obviously, it landed, and you're right, to characterize the deaths of these generational devices like the Palm. I mean, like Windows, Windows mobile PC, definitely. Pocket PC disappeared, and then BlackBerry came and went. But it was really the beginning of it was in 2007 when the iPhone came out. So when they saw that coming in 2007, how long have you been with Ingenious?
I've actually been with Ingenious Med since 2005.
Okay, so you saw this coming. So 2007, what did that do to your organization when the iPhone was launched and kind of the light went back on, the glimmer in the eyes, the glow in the eyes, saying we can do mobile now? What was that like as being a part of the company?
So, it's lots of different perspectives. At first, it was, we've gone down the path of trying to be on the Palm. We went down the path of fighting to be on Windows Mobile. We just went down the path of fighting to be on BlackBerry, and now they're going to throw something out that's just yet another device that you actually have to support. We have to invest additional development dollars in. But just watching the adoption and reading an article every week, every month about just an upward trends of smartphones, physicians, everybody in the healthcare community just latching on to Apple for every mobile device. That made it a no-brainer for us. I mean, we knew that we had to have something on that platform, and here was our chance to get back into the mobile game and actually be at point of care, because now we're talking about Wi-Fi's everywhere. Yeah. Now we're talking about you don't need to sync with a docking station or your PC. You're just walking around, and if you don't have Wi-Fi and if you're not allowed to use it, then you have your own data plans that you can actually use it through. And then we got into the whole, that's where we need to be there from the point of care perspective. But then let's also remember to keep security in mind. We are a healthcare software solution. Let's build this thing with the utmost encryption levels so that when healthcare organizations like a Kaiser and HCA are evaluating us, security is not a question. We've already gone through all the fail-proof methodologies that we knew existed at that time.
It's funny because I see a lot of companies that even later than you guys. I mean, you weren't late. You were very early by all stretch. And I love the fact that you guys tried it in 1999, and then you're a little hesitant. Obviously, in 2007 when the iPhone is launched, nobody knows what's about to happen. And anybody who says, I say this often, but it's worth repeating. Anybody who thinks that they, in hindsight, knew that this mobile revolution was coming with these devices is a liar, because everybody hesitated at that moment, right? It's like, we see some adoption, but I was around when RIM was, had 1 million users and then 2 million users, and we thought, wow, that's incredible. And they were telling us about getting up to 50 million users, and we thought there's no way. And now look at this. We're about to have 2 billion smartphones on the planet, and it's crazy what's happened. Nobody saw that. But you've been not burned, but you've taken a stab 8 years previous. So, that must have taken, and I see companies now that tried 2 years ago in mobile and now are gun shy, right? And they didn't do nearly as much as you did. What was that like to convince the team to go through that process of saying, we have to be a part of this, regardless of what we did 8 years ago? This is the time. Now is the time. What was that decision process like?
So a couple of things. One, I think, when we're going in with physicians and we're going in to make process change and we're going in to make them do something that's going to potentially change the way that they're currently doing it, which is a note, piece of paper, and a card and throwing it on somebody's desk.
It's crazy.
So now we're getting them to learn, a platform, and you have to understand how to manage your patients, and how do you do this electronically now, and you have some additional features, so you want to make sure that they get acclimated to those as well. Well, what you see is resistance. Well, I don't want to go to the web every time. They're looking for ways to say, I don't want to do it. So then they're saying, well, if you had it on the iPhone, then I would do it. Oh, well, you know what? Actually, if you had it on the BlackBerry, I would do it.
Of course.
Oh, you know what? Actually, if you had it on the Android, I would actually take a shot at doing it now. So what that gave us and how our executive team translated that is we have to give our physicians options. As technology is changing and as everybody, this tablet, this smartphone phenomenon, we need to give everybody their preferred platform as an option, whether it be an iPad, whether it be an iPad mini, whether it be, the old BlackBerry. We still have 7 BlackBerry users, and that's fine.
7 BlackBerry users?
But you have to support them, right?
You have 7 BlackBerry users?
Yes.
Just 7 out of the 25,000 customers that users that you have. Just 7.
Just 7.
Oh man, good for you guys for supporting it though. But
so
just 7.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's I'm Canadian, right? So RIM and BlackBerry have been the bastions of technology in Canada, but I've never heard that kind of ratio where people have said we just have 7. I can name them and I know where they are. That's hysterical.
And that probably has gotten lower. These are statistics from previous quarter. So.
Oh man. So is it predominantly iPhone and it's obviously iPhone and Android. Is there Windows Phone in there as well? Windows 8?
Windows is not in the mix any longer.
Wow.
With our mobile adoption that we see, it's actually 95.5, and I want to say 95 Apple device of some sort, 5 on the Android side.
Wow.
And when I go to the healthcare communities or conferences, you see every provider with a Mac, iPad, or an iPhone.
Yeah.
I just think it latches to that industry better than the Android somehow did. But to answer your question even further, so it's one, you want to give physicians, options. You don't want them to push back and say, you know what, our sales strategy then changes. It's your preferred platform. You pick what you want to do. You can mix them together. Maybe half the day you want to use your tablet and half the day you actually want to do it on the workstation. Or when you're rounding at this facility, there's a computer in every room, so you don't actually want your tablet. But when you're rounding at a rural facility, you may need your tablet because there's no technology around that hospital at all. And I think our executives saw that as a very, clear path to take, is in order to keep this sales cycle sustainable and in order the physicians to keep the adoption at the 97% to 99% of where we are, we have to do this. That we have to bring this back. And I think that they were very, very forward thinking in that sense and didn't hold back in terms of, oh gosh, we have to support another product, or oh gosh, we have to put another development efforts, or oh gosh, we have to have, training on this platform, we have to design against this platform. So it was very clear once we saw the physician adoption issue.
Part of adoption also has to be that the product serves a purpose, and not just a purpose, but the product is easier to use than the way they're doing it today, right? Or that it's a part of their life. It's seamlessly integrated into what they do. So, the device, pervasive connectivity and pervasive use on any platform is very important. And I love that, like the multiple screens. Everybody talks about that today. But it also comes down to the product that you put in front of them has to be much easier than picking up a piece of paper,
right,
and a pen and writing it down, right? Or there has to be a consequence for somebody losing that piece of paper with all that information, the cue cards or whatever. So your process, your software has to be simple and easy to use and part of their lives, easy to integrate into their lives. So when you guys were building the software, was it did you start with like 1,000 features and scale it down to 1? Did you start with 1 and then scale it up to 1,000? What was your methodology, your thinking behind building the product out?
So what we did with our mobile application is we actually just focused in on the key physician workflow items. So they needed to manage their patients, they needed to capture the charge, they had to have the clinical decision support components that I was talking about earlier. MasterCoder is the name of that product. We had to have that integrated, and we had to have the communication efforts of having them being able to sign off and hand out to each other, or physician teams that are coming on. And then lastly, we kept the quality component of having our PQRS questionnaires prop up at the time of care based on certain aging, certain CPT, certain diagnoses of the patient. So that's really at the core of what the web platform does. But we had to, again, keep it simple.
Yes.
If we threw every bell and whistle that we actually do on our web platform, we would have never probably had a first release of this platform. So this is where
it would still be in production, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where I think our founder, Dr. Stephen Liu, this is where he can take it as his physician, as he is a practicing physician, and say, guys, this is all it needs to have. And I'm going to test it to make sure that it's less than X amount of clicks, because if it starts getting into more than 15, starts getting in more than 10, anything above that 10, 15 range, providers are going to complain. So having him to be our end user to say, this is a no-go, got to make it simpler. So then we have to go back to the drawing board and say, all right, now how can we achieve the same action within maybe one tap, maybe a tap in a selector, but it auto filters the option, so you're not having to come up with a free text entry. But that's what he does, and I think he is the success of why we are who we are today, for keeping us in line with that. Because very easily what companies do is they let the development folks take control of the platforms, and they want to do all these cool things, which is great. It's great, but if the end user isn't going to fundamentally adopt and use it, it's not really worth going down that path. It's not worth the development dollars. It's not worth the investment in something that's just cool. We want a highly usable solution in the marketplace, and that's where we have made that difference.
It's funny because it just almost sounds like he's like your Steve Jobs, right? That persistence, like when you're satisfied with something, it would be like no, it's got to be this, it's got to be one button, and it's got to be no buttons, and it's got to be a click. It's got to be that kind of that somebody who puts a rigorous test on everything, and that's a huge lesson around this. Is that it would be very difficult, I think, for a company to come in who doesn't have that oversight from somebody like a practicing doctor whose problem you're trying to solve, right? So right. He's the first one to be able to tell you these things. It's great. Boy, more companies should have that. Is that simply because, most companies are, as you said, are led by engineers, and engineers are interested in creating tremendous value all at once. But it could be just that one thing that is necessary in order for somebody to bring it into their day, which is key. Very key.
No, absolutely agree. I mean, to this day, we don't even actually have a web release that goes out the door without him testing and timing how long it takes to work a patient, to add a new bill, to add it to our list. I mean, he's timing it, he's clicking it, he's counting. And those releases don't walk out of our door, both for mobile and web platforms, without his approval.
I love it. You were already in the hospitals early on, and then, was it hard to introduce a mobile solution? Was it you guys pushing the mobile out, or was it really the doctors? Because there's the way I perceive this, and please, Krina, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's the doctors who may be, as my physician, I think he was 65 at the time, carried a Palm Pilot, loved it, was kind of a technically adept at it. So the doctors are bringing these devices into the hospitals. Right. You are trying to allow them to use these devices to create value for not only themselves, but for the hospital, that you can measure very quickly, as in, additional billings and revenue in a time where revenue is very important because funding is being cut. And there's a lot of stress on the healthcare system. And then you've got in the middle of this, the hospital, right? Which has to approve you connecting with the doctors to be able to allow them to do this. So this long-winded question is, how hard was it to bring this mobile solution into the doctors through the hospital? Or was it hard because there was a pull, or was there a pull from the doctors?
It wasn't actually hard. I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Options. All they want is options. And some of our organizations are strict. A Kaiser Permanente doesn't allow healthcare applications to be ran on physician devices. Okay. So a Kaiser, what they did is, we're going to get Ingenious Med, and hey, all my physicians, as long as you use Ingenious Med to capture your charges, then we're going to buy you an iPhone or an Android or a device of your choice. Yeah. Okay, so that's a example. And then there's an enterprise, like some of our management companies who are probably never going to buy their physicians' devices, but they're just going to say, hey, Ingenious Med is our preferred charge capture platform. They actually have mobile applications. So if you want to use them on your smartphones, or if you want to use them on your minis or your iPads, sure, feel free to. We're not going to supply them to you. And then you also have the web as an option as well. Yeah.
But isn't there like in that situation, it's one thing, Kaiser Permanente, you buy devices for everybody, and then because they see the value, if it saves them X number of thousands of dollars or adds revenue to the tune of X number of thousands of dollars, not saves. Like this is actual tangible dollars. There's a business case, but do you worry that there's a, in other healthcare institutions, there's a have not challenge here, that half of the people will use the devices, half of the people won't use the devices? How do you bridge that?
So I think, majority, if you have a technically friendly physician or a tech savvy kind of guy, he's always going to look for, I need to do everything at bedside. I need to do everything while I'm walking. I need to get it done before I actually get out of the facility.
Yeah.
Then you have the individuals that just love to sit down and have a keyboard at the tips of their fingers and just say, I prefer to sit down, I prefer to add my patient, I prefer to use a mouse, and I prefer to do it while I'm doing other things at the workstation as well. So I think, one of the neat things that we do from our training and implementation strategy is we're going to train you on everything. But then what our mobile team actually does is they'll go back out to existing accounts and say, hey, do you know that you could do this on your device? And let me show you how quickly it is. Because now they've kind of gotten familiar with the process, right? So they know fundamentally how our platform works. And then, so they've absorbed everything. And so now you show them the web platform, because maybe at the time they chose, they want to do the web, but now you show them the mobile platform and they're like, oh, wow, this is really simple. And because they understand how everything's working in the background, they understand what handoff means, they understand the PQRS. So now when we go back in, we're picking up additional users. So the key is give them the options at the time, because they have to absorb your platform. They have to understand how it works. But let 90 to 120 days go by, and we go back in and say, hey guys, did you know that we have a mobile app and this is how simple it is? And you demo it to them right by standing them while they're rounding, and they will download it right then and there, and they will go off and start using the mobile platform.
I love that. I mean, is that how you market to them? It seems like there's got to be a challenge here, because doctors don't stand still. Hospitals might actually impose your software on the doctors. How does that happen? How does that infiltrate? Because it seems to me that once you get into a hospital, it would be up to the hospital to be able to push this in front of all of their doctors. Because do you have any influence there?
We generally don't guide them on the platform. We're just telling them that our mobile is the simplest, it's the easiest, it's the fastest. That's probably what you want to do. But just in case, if that's not the path you want to go down, here's the web. Now, we have some groups that have come to us. We have several actually enterprise groups that say, we just want to deploy your mobile platform. Don't show them the web application.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. But it's just now starting to happen. If we talk about the historical, it hasn't happened in the last few years. The last probably 13, 14 years. It's just recently be coming up in maybe the last 18 months. We're getting some RFPs and RFIs that are strictly just for mobile.
Just mobile.
Just mobile. It says mobile charge capture at the point of care is all they're looking for.
Wow. And what a shift that is, isn't it? Simply because the founders must be looking back and thinking like, yes, finally. Right. 14 years after the fact, people have caught on to the fact this device is actually a benefit to them.
But it just validates why we were founded. It validates at the beginning of time what we were trying to do, which is be at point of care to ensure that higher percentage of chart compliance, making sure your documentation matches your level of service, is really all people want today. Yeah. They want you to be at point of care. They want you to make sure you document right after. And then our users want to prove that if you're not using it at the point of care, you're actually jeopardizing the compliance percentage for our organization, which then drives them even more to say, you've got to use a mobile device, or you've got to do it as you're seeing all the patients.
It seems like it's such a niche spot to be in, right? So, you think about what you could be at the bedside. You can do diagnostics. You can do patient record management. You can do all those things that have this high price tag of adoption, in my opinion, right? Where there's ramifications or legal hurdles that you have to cross, and it's a battle that's going on still to this day about digital records management and all those kind of things. But it just seems like, hey, listen, you know what? The pain for the hospitals is cash. The outcome is we've got to be able to, we're losing money because people aren't being billed. Nobody's being billed. And there's no record, patient record data that is putting the drugs and the medication and the service that we've given them with the cost. So that's an incredible niche, but really fortified by putting this on the device so it becomes seamless and simple. Because oftentimes, I read this great report about hospitals that they're looking for ways to help doctors wash their hands more often. right? So it's, if we're not washing our hands more often in a hospital, and it's a way that diseases transfer from person to person, the idea of doing bedside billing is so far out there, isn't it? Like, there's a disconnect there somewhere for me.
But I think what it really fundamentally goes down to is the institution that we're selling into and how they want to handle their physicians and how they incent their physicians.
Yeah. That's important.
When it comes to a compliance notion and it's about compliance and you're putting the organization for millions and millions and millions of dollars of fines, it's pretty easy to get your physicians to do this kind of thing. And you can prove it because you have the codes, you have the documentation, and you can say, here's our compliance rate. We're in the 60s. As an acceptable rate in the industry, we need to be above 90. So the better organizations that we work with do a little bit of, carrot and stick methodology, is to say, hey, if you're going to stay into your compliance rate, you're going to do point of care, we're going to give you X tiers of bonusing to make sure that you're doing it the way that we want you to do it. We all know if there's no, a monetary incentive, it's really hard to change behavior. I don't care if you're a physician or if you're just, an individual within a any corporate setting, actually. Yeah. So that's probably how I would say most of our groups actually deal with that. And the ones that don't do the incentive model, you'll be surprised, and then they're just like, gosh, our physicians don't listen to us. Well, you're not creating any sort of, accountability, or you're not creating any kind of trackable metrics that you can prove to say that you're actually not, operating within the processes defined by this organization.
That's so astute because, incentive, like, you never want to be in the change behavioral business. Like, you never want to go into a hospital, somebody who's been practicing medicine for 20 years, and hand them a device and say, okay, now go, this is your new way of doing things, right? So it's very difficult. So, like, are we in this transition period where the next generation of doctor that comes through these hospitals is going to be technically savvy, and you're going to be able to enhance the services that you're currently offering, so it'll just, that's their springboard into additional services through Ingenious Med?
Exactly. Our physicians aren't adopting. Our compliance rates are, under 60. Yeah. And our charge lags of getting this date of service is 3-4 days outside of when the patient was seen. Can you help us? What have you seen as best practices in the industries? And how do the successful organizations of, 99% charges captured in the same day, 90+ percentile in terms of, compliance rate, master coder, mobile usage at the point of care, how do you deploy that kind of behavior? Right. And really giving them, the showcase accounts that have all kinds of accountability, have incentive plans, have trainers, have processes that lock and hold everybody in that revenue cycle, the physician charge capture, the patient quality, the communication components, all tying them together and keeping everybody accountable.
How much of a diversification is this? And maybe that's not the right word, but like doctors, I'm a doctor, damn it. I think of, Bones on Star Trek, right? Like, doctors are in there to try to fix people. And the last thing it seems to me on their mind is like, I don't want technology and all this. Like, I know it's part of their work. I understand that it's part of their work, but there's got to be some resistance between, like, doctors walking in there saying, listen, my goal here is to save lives. My goal here is to treat patients. My goal here is to get them in and out as quickly as possible and home and healthy. And all of this onus on revenue generation and time to billing and that bedside manner is no longer just about you're going to be okay, Billy, you're going to be okay. It's more like you're going to be okay, Billy, as I fill out this form to bill you on time. So is there a pullback from the doctors because of this technology?
So there's a couple of things I'm going to say, and probably the physician community is going to hate me for saying this.
Don't say anything that people are going to hate. Yeah, no. Go ahead.
Well, you got to look at it as a business. I mean, healthcare is fundamentally turning into a business. Yeah. It's just like me telling my executive team, I'm busy. I have to get all this done. I have to, work with X amount of clients. I've got to be on the road this much. But if I can't quantify it and I actually can't show them the volume of work that I'm handling, the amount of throughput that I'm actually producing for the organization, and the revenue impact that I have on the organization, I don't see how anybody would want to operate without creating that visibility. Yes, it is important, and being bedside patient care is fundamentally what they do. But if you also then, if you're a manager or if you're a clinical leader and you need to hire additional physicians, how do you get an easy way to go to your executives and say, hey, here's my statistics, here's my volume, here's my justification for an additional FTE right now? I mean, without having that data, without having what you are actually doing and bringing to the organization, it's hard for me to fathom how can you work with the organization, or how can you ask them for more?
Right.
Or how can you say, I need this, or I'm being overworked? The organization is just going to say, prove it to me.
Yeah.
Prove to me in numbers, how are you being overworked? What are you actually doing for me? And everybody wants to know, how are you impacting my bottom line? And our tools with capturing that data real time, having the right reporting components built around it real time, shooting them out to whoever needs to see and gain that visibility into your organization about length of stay, about readmission, about the RVUs, the complexity of the patients that you're actually seeing, what are the top 25 diseases that you're actually treating, and providing that real time to your hospital executive leadership, and they're going to be blown away, because there's not many platforms that do it real time. You'll hear about everybody who comes in 30, 60 days late with their dashboards because it's after the fact. Yeah. But it's too late to create that actionable change that you want to on the ground.
And that's been brought on. That has to have been brought on by obviously the mobile piece. But that data is so important, right? So there's oftentimes in the things that we do and the companies that we look at, that I look at in particular, the data is worth far more. The analysis of the data is worth far more than anything else, any software licenses or any capabilities. Like, Twitter, for example, it's a simple little, tool that has become the nervous system for the internet. Right. Where things break on Twitter much faster than they ever do in traditional news. I find out about James Gandolfini. I find out about everything that goes on, the floods in, here in Canada, in Calgary, that basically drowned the entire city. So you find out through Twitter, and it's about data. It's about capturing that data, harnessing that data, and highlighting that data. That must be the next piece for you guys, which is being able to take a good approach to data visualization and display that in a way that benefits the hospitals. You're doing that right now, or is that something that's coming in the future?
We're already doing that. Yeah. I think this is, again, where I'm going to count the visionaries of this organization. And they our CEO, Hart Williford, our founder, Steve Liu, together, just from being from software companies from his past, said, now that we have all this great data and we're collecting all this information, he predicted 3 years ago that we needed to have a business intelligence platform. So he invested, we made the investment, and when we came out with it, it was blowing people away. It was taking not just, static reports of counts and summaries, but we're trending. We're now getting into the predictive analytics game, right? Trying to tell you what's going to happen with your patient population maybe next year. Or let's try to predict what your volume is going to be like this October, November, December, based on 8 years of data that you've had with us as being a client. But doing push reporting, right? We don't want to go down the pull methodology. I want you to download another app on your iPad, and I want to push weekly reports out to you. Hey, my medical director, or hey, my CMO, or hey, CFO, this is a revenue throughput that just went through our application. This is how many charges, this is how many are past due, and this is how much your AR's aging sitting in our application. But not only making them come, but doing the push, I think, is the biggest thing that we could possibly have done. It's one thing to ask people to change behavior and say, I need you to log into this platform every day, but it's another when it's in their inbox or on their iPad or on their iPhone within a native app telling you what's going on. We're telling you, you need to do something about this. And then alerting you when you're certain metrics that you want to keep an eye on. If your length of stay is going above 3.56 and you want to know. And, for our clinical leaders managing 40, 50 sites across the nation, you've got Hawaii, you've got California, you've got Florida, and everything else in between. It's impossible to do without having intelligent data. or having intelligent reporting systems telling you this is the ones you need to be paying attention to.
And doesn't it come down to that kind of looking at that single metric that you've got to be fixated on, because data is overwhelming, right? You can spend an entire lifetime looking through the data, but you've got to be able to call it down to that one. That's why people like grades, or like an A, B, C, or D, is that they understand this. It's so simple. But who cares what goes into that A, B, C, or D? There's a methodology behind it, but all I know is that if I get to a B minus, I am actually tipping to a low end, and I need to be able to bump that up. So do you help them with that formulating that? Do you put a methodology behind the data? Yeah.
So what we do is we sit down with them and say, what are the benchmarks that you want to be held accountable? We're constantly going to, MGMA, SHM, other industry, UMC, academic metrics, going to all these organizations and trying to figure out what is the industry standard for some of these things. And as we're sitting down and we're onboarding them, we're coaching them and saying, all right, well, this is what your distributions of your levels 1s and 2s should look like based on where you are in your demographic, area of where you are in the United States. It looks like, your average RVU per bill should be around 1.96. And if it looks like you're at 1.75, it looks like you got some undercoding going on, based on what we know, what the statistics are in the industry. So what we're doing is we're helping them define them. We're using industry metrics to guide them a little bit, but they ultimately can pick what they want that accountable component to be. But our job is to bring them all the educational decision-making points that they need to make that decision.
And is that comes from the device in the doctor's hand by doing all of those things that they need to do, by inputting it from across the nation and all 25,000 users. You're distilling that so that people can make actual business decisions. Not only are you helping them collect money, identify where money hasn't been collected before, and then collect that money, so it's a boost to the bottom line. You're not selling them a process that's going to save them money down the road. You are actually selling them something that is going to actually get the money that they've already earned and actually collect on it, that they haven't been doing it before. But then you're also collating that data and giving them actionable things that metric that allows them to be able to build their business, grow their business, focus on the right things.
Absolutely. Our job is to tell you what's going on. Your job is to continue to add to your business.
Yeah.
Your job is to continue to staff. Your job is to continue to hire. Your job is to continuously acquire new organizations. And we're going to help you scale, because we're going to help you manage all your physicians and definitely manage that physician P&L.
I love it. And I don't even know what you could have done, how you could have built a business without, web maybe, but web is a behavioral change. I have to go and sit at a terminal. Mobile is like an extension now to everybody's arm. It's so I don't know how you guys, or could you have built this business the way that you guys are growing right now without these devices? How hard would that have been? You don't want to even think about it.
Successful. I think that sales cycle that you talked about earlier being already lengthy, I think we would have added probably a doubling metric on that lengthy sales cycle. When you have to create a funnel of a single way of doing things, it's just, you can't get everybody to agree.
Yeah. Or adopt it. Yeah. Nobody's going to adopt it because there's going to be people that complain about it.
You've got to give them preference, and you've got to always give the end user choices. Choices means that they feel like they're getting a say-so in how they're going to accomplish the overall goal.
So if you were talking to the people that are listening on the other end, I've worked with many companies. I do some consulting, and I work with many companies in trying to get into the medical field, to get into hospitals, and they literally, they stumble on something. They stumble on a bunch of things. The biggest one is getting inside, that sales cycle, because sometimes it can be monstrous. But if you're going to say, listen, if you could distill the challenges and maybe a way to overcome some of the challenges of getting into hospitals, like, if there were 1, 2, or 3 things that you could leave these people with, who give them a little bit of hope, because you guys seem to have been able to identify that single niche, be able to show tremendous value, and then be able to, once get in there, continuously show value for other areas. So not just the doctors, the executive branch as well, and the national branch. So is there anything that you can impart, or are you just going to say, well, no, it's okay, we got this. We got the hospitals covered. No,
if I had to tell everybody else how to do it, it would have to be always in this day and age with healthcare and revenue dollars. Everybody's looking for dollars. Everybody's losing money.
Like new dollars, right? Not saving money, but dollars.
Exactly. Yeah. New dollars.
Yeah.
And when we're going in and we're saying we're going to bring you a demonstrable ROI, we're going to create that for you. And quantifying it and telling them on the top of what you're currently making, we're going to tell you this is what you're going to make. When you lead a discussion that always ends up with leaving money and adding money at the end of the year to the P&L, that's a really easy sell. That one, you have their attention.
Yeah.
Two, they're going to ask you how you're going to do that. Well, by creating highly adoptable physician solutions is how we do that. If the adoption isn't there, it doesn't matter how much I'm going to make you, and it doesn't matter how much you're going to invest in it. We have to have the end users on board. And this other success criteria is saying that's why people pick us. Everybody loves the simplicity in what we do and how we do it. So proving out that whatever technical solution that you're actually selling, quantify some adoption rates around it.
Yeah.
Show how it is easy. Show how it doesn't add 55 minutes to the physician's day.
Exactly.
Talk about the efficiencies and relate them to the problems that exist in healthcare that we all don't want to talk about.
So good. So clear.
Really what we do is we know you don't have communication when you're handing off. We know that you don't know how to effectively divide your patient loads for the day, so you may need to call in somebody to help. But digitizing all of that, keeping it open so everybody can see. I can pull up my mobile device at home and see what my actual census is at the hospital before I even went in. Or just seeing what am I about to walk into tomorrow. They weren't able to do stuff like that before, but telling them all of those things that come to life from just, we are charge capture, but everything that happens around us.
You have a vantage point into this that many people don't, because you are sitting at the bedside.
And that's the other key component is I would hope that everybody else who's trying to get into where we are, the key is actually creating something and picking up something that needs to happen at the point of care, that needs to have the compliance component and the quality component built in right then and there.
Very, very, very key. So, I mean, you're hitting them on so many fronts that how can they say no to you, right?
Exactly.
Right. They're saying no to their own business.
When you go into an organization, you say revenue, compliance, and quality, you have their attention.
Boom. So, I've got to finish with this. And this is amazing, Krina, because it's changed my opinion really about the medical industry. I know that they're longing for technology, but as long as you're speaking the same language, the important language to them, not
right.
to you, but to them, the rest will flow. And oftentimes they'll tell you where their problems are, right? You'll know this. Read a report or read something where we're talking about simple things like compliance issues. Where are they not compliant in a general sense? That's why I love this. I keep coming back to that story about they don't wash their hands enough. And somebody built this tracker with a Bluetooth thing that sent, a wristband that vibrated every 5 minutes so they reminded them. And I thought, that's a behavior change that is very difficult to apply a technology solution to with infrastructure and things just to get people to wash their hands. It's a hard sell, but yours isn't. So take a grand look. Is the medical industry and are hospitals ripe for even more disruption in the mobile space? Is it a good place to focus for mobile companies to be going into, like mobile pure play companies, to go into the hospitals and sell a solution? Is there opportunity there for these guys?
I think there's opportunity, and I'm going to preface it by making sure that they're secure and that they integrate and they interop with other applications that are being built, because that's where the industry is going. What the physician doesn't want is 4 different applications that has to do 4 different things. So the biggest thing that we're hearing in the industry today is how do you create that interoperability amongst your EMR, amongst your charge capture solution, amongst all your other systems that have to be used during the physician's rounding day. Now, what I'm going to say is if we have 50 vendors coming in selling 50 different platform apps, and I've got to sit here and figure out how they work, it's not going to make it. So while you're developing your platform, my only suggestion is figure out how you can connect and integrate and work with other solutions, or help or create a single solution to multiple problems.
I love that. You're so right. I mean, most small companies will come in and say, like, here's our solution and here's our terminal, right? So it works very close. It only works with our terminal. Like Square Payments, for example, in the payment section is that they just want to put a terminal and not integrate with your point of sale. So the same thing happens in the medical industry. And for me, this device, wherever I put mine, could be the termination, the easy termination for all those other services, right? So you're saying bring it in, add compliance, add all of that stuff in, and make it so that it's easy. Unify the systems, right, and you've got to win.
Exactly.
It's so easy to say, so difficult to do, isn't it?
Yes,
Oh my goodness.
we're faced with that current challenge, but I know that the challenge at the forefront is who can figure that out.
Do you ever find? Do you ever,
that probability?
do you ever find that like it's hard to contain? You know, the opportunities that you guys are seeing right now, that, you know, for you and your founders and your leadership team, is it a challenge to say, okay, no, you know, bring our focus in and focus on the things that need to get done today and tomorrow, and we'll worry about new features, you know, when we've done what we need to be doing here? Is it a challenge for you guys?
It's an everyday challenge.
Yeah.
And I think when you have 25,000 users and we're dealing with an industry that's changing every day, you want to be strategically, you know, you want to build out our value, and you want to make sure that we're going in the right direction as a company, you know, with our vision and our plan of how we want to move forward. But then you have all these other, you know, items that are coming up that, you know, we've already put on our roadmap what we want to do, but then compliance and coding audits are becoming a big deal now, and we've got to change the way that we're kind of managing the revenue cycle component. Well, how do we add that in? You know, as we're adding some of these features that may not, you know, translate well to the mobile device, but maybe on an iPad they do, because you have significant real estate. So now you're trying to take some of the key things that we've done and you're trying to replicate them down, but then they've got to stay in tune with all the bigger strategic items that we're trying to build. So we're facing all the challenges that any fast-paced growth company is facing today, especially in an industry that's evolving as quickly as this one is.
I love it. I love it. Like, it's so fascinating. What an interesting spot to be in. And kudos to your founders for thinking this way. Very few companies that I know that have had the gumption to start a company around mobile in 1999 on the Palm Pilot, which was not even a real mobile device. It was a PIM. And to be able to look back kind of 14 years later and think, wow, we made the right choice.
Yep. We've been on the right path since day one.
Oh, man. So where should we send people who are interested in learning about you guys? Should we just send them to your website?
Absolutely. IngeniousMed.com.
And they're in Atlanta.
All kinds of fun contact information, materials, everything you need.
Well, and for those of you who are listening or watching this, this is a fascinating space. The health industry, the medical industry, it's along the lines of these big bastions, medical and education. And here's a perfect example of how integrating mobile into something like this, finding that spot, bringing new revenue in to a hospital, aiding in compliance, and then making it simple and easy to adopt by the physicians, the people that are using it. Those are the three key things that I learned from this, and I'm sure you learned much more from this. And it's go and think about that as you're building your product, not only for the medical space, but for every space, because those are key right there. And I think the big one is revenue, net new revenue, which is just, if you can do that, I mean, you'll be printing money, literally.
Exactly.
Krina, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate your time. This has been so great, so fascinating.
Thank you.
Please go to ingeniusmed.com. We've been speaking with Krina Patel, who's the Vice President of Professional Services at Ingenious Med. Thank you very much for doing this, Krina. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time on Untether.tv.